Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about the next big Kirby game, the sequel to Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Let's call it Kirby and the Forgotten Land 2. It likely won't actually have that name, but really what I'm getting at here is the next 3D Kirby game. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is my favorite Kirby game ever. It's doing extremely well on Nintendo Switch, and I believe HAL Laboratory, the developer of the Kirby series, is likely going all in on the sequel to Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and it's going to be coming out pretty soon for Nintendo Switch 2. So that's what we'll be speaking more on today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So with the success of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, you might say, yeah, it makes sense for HAL to make another 3D Kirby game. It should happen at some point down the road, but some might think it could take a fair bit longer. It took HAL many years to finally produce the first 3D Kirby game. Maybe we shouldn't be expecting one so soon, but I think it could be happening pretty soon. I wouldn't be surprised if the game comes out next year in the first year of Nintendo Switch 2. Now, of course, it's possible maybe we have to wait a little bit longer, maybe it comes out in 2026, but that's it. I think the latest we see it is 2026, and I think there's a really good chance it's actually coming out next year. So let me go over my reasoning here. The developers of Kirby and the Forgotten Land have already expressed an interest in making more 3D Kirby games to follow up Forgotten Land. So when we go back to the Ask Developer Volume 4 of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, that's this interview series that Nintendo has for some of their major games, at the end of the interview, this was asked to the developers. Do you think the Kirby series will continue to explore 3D action gameplay? And if you're able to, could you tell us what kind of Kirby games you would like to make in the future? Endo. We have packed in many unique ideas to make a variety of different 2D actions of Kirby. To create Kirby's first ever 3D action game, however, there are still a lot of learnings, like how to manage stage density and direct 3D camera movement. If we can apply the skills we gained from this title, I think we'll be able to come up with a lot of new gameplay ideas in future Kirby titles. So just from that right there, it highlights how Kirby and the Forgotten Land was a learning curve for HAL. They figured out how to make a 3D Kirby game. And when you look at part 1 of the interview, they talk about the challenges of making a 3D Kirby game and some of the changes they made to have it work. Like here, they discuss how they had to really think about the position and camera angles when it comes to Kirby and how we perceive his movement, because he is a pink blob with simple dimensions, and at least in his base form, not much of a costume, but they figured that out. Or how when Kirby throws his own projectiles, the hitboxes were adjusted so it can make sense within a 3D space. There were a lot of challenges in transitioning Kirby from 2D to 3D. There was a reason why it took them so long to do this. But they figured it out. They came up with a number of different ideas, like the fuzzy landing, or just the density of the environments, or how the camera angles to hint at where you're supposed to go next. They figured out how to make Kirby work in a 3D space. So the ultimate point I'm making here is that hurdle of figuring it out, they already did. They already have the framework. The next 3D Kirby game will not be nearly as much of a challenge as this first one, and because of this, it may even have a shorter development cycle. Taking a look at the list of different games HAL has made over the years, I noticed some interesting patterns. One is that, yeah, they come out with games pretty consistently, almost every year, and in most years, multiple games. Now, most of these games are smaller releases, they're not big full-on $60 priced games, but still, they are coming out with games all the time. However, there are some exceptions. There are some times where they skip a year. So notice here, in 2012 they came out with Kirby's Dream Collection. Then 2013 there was nothing, and then in 2014 we saw the release of Kirby Triple Deluxe. Now there's a few other Kirby offerings, but Kirby Triple Deluxe is a mainline Kirby game. It was the best-selling Kirby game on the Nintendo 3DS for the mainline series. And so what's interesting here is that in 2012, there was just one Kirby game, and then in 2013 there was nothing, and then in 2014 we see a mainline release. And then after that point, they didn't have a break for a while. 2014 had games, 2015 had games, 2016 had games, 2017 had games, 2018 had games, 2019, 2020. Straight. They didn't stop. But then in 2021, they all of a sudden didn't have any games. However, the year prior, 2020, they had just one game, Kirby Fighters 2. And so what happened to start 2022? They came out with their next mainline Kirby game, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. So there's an interesting pattern we're starting to see here. These 2-year windows where we see just one Kirby game, and then there's a year where there's literally nothing, and then right after we see a big mainline release. Not a side game, not an eShop game, but a full-on new game. And it's looking like we're in that scenario again, because last year, we just got Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, a remaster of a prior Kirby game. And this year for 2024, there still has been no Kirby game announced. Now, you might say, well, they could announce something in maybe a September Direct. This is possible. Maybe there will be a September Direct or a mini of some kind, and they will shadow drop another Kirby game, thus breaking the pattern. However, Kirby's Dream Buffet, which would fit that bill, that game was announced and came out very quickly, very similarly was only on the eShop. That was announced in July of 2022. Already at the end of July. I don't think it's happening. It seems like 2024 is going to be a Kirby vacant year. So essentially what I'm getting at here is that pattern-wise, I think we are positioned to see a Kirby release for 2025, and it's likely going to be a mainline one. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it will be a 3D Kirby game, even though they have gone through the hurdles, but I think there's even more to point out here. So going back to the interview, let's read what Kamiyama had to say on the future of 3D Kirby. It feels like some people consider Kirby games to be for younger players, with older players eventually aging out of the series. But Kirby and the Forgotten Land ended up being a game that we believe players of a wide age range can enjoy, compared to the previous games in the series. We'd like to continue making titles that earn the attention of players who may have moved on from Kirby. We want to make titles that adults will thoroughly enjoy too. With that said, I hope this game grows into an experience that can be appreciated all over the world. And so this to me is very, very interesting, because Kirby and the Forgotten Land is my favorite Kirby game. And for many years, I haven't felt like giving Kirby a try, because it's felt like mostly the same, basically a simple experience. But when I think back on it, the Kirby games I most enjoyed were back when I was a kid, when I played Kirby Crystal Shards on Nintendo 64, or Kirby Canvas Curse on Nintendo DS. Now as an adult, the Kirby game that I finally decided to give a try was Kirby and the Forgotten Land, because it is a game that's structured in a way that appeals to a wide range of people. But let's read what the other developers had to say, because I think something will become very clear as we do. Kumazaki. This title was the biggest project of the entire Kirby series thus far. For a while, it felt as if we weren't able to release a mainstream game, but now I'm overwhelmed to see the efforts of our team finally blossoming and delivering a 3D action Kirby game to players all over the world. Also, throughout this production, we are able to create an environment in which we will be able to further take on new challenges with our most reliable staff members. Kirby still has unlimited potential. We hope to be even more wild and free when we create future Kirby titles. This might be an exaggeration, but after everything we've discussed here, I think it's safe to call this title a masterpiece within the Kirby series. At the same time, I think this is just another checkpoint in Kirby's long history. We hope everyone looks forward to future titles in the Kirby series. And so there are some really big things that are said here. He talks about how they finally are able to make a mainstream Kirby game, something that's reached a larger audience. And when we take a look at Kirby sales, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is at 7.52 million as of March 2024. It is by far the best-selling Kirby game, but I think something that's worthy of note here is that the game has had strong evergreen sales. It sold incredibly well right out of the gate. Even at 18 months, it was at 6.96 million, and then 2 years later, it was at the number we see here, 7.52. it is continuing to sell. This game is going to eclipse 8 million. It wouldn't even shock me if a few years down the road it eclipses 10 million. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is blowing other Kirby games out of the water when it comes to sales potential. Looking at this list here, the second best selling Kirby game is Kirby's Dream Land for the Nintendo Game Boy that released back in 1992. It took them this long to finally come out with a Kirby game that would pass the sales of Kirby's Dream Land. That's just insane when you really think about it. Now, Kirby Star Allies, the other Kirby Switch game that's a mainline release, sold 3.98 million. But something I would like to say with this is that Kirby Star Allies was simply the first Kirby game that came out early for the console. I think that had they come out with a Kirby game like Forgotten Land in the beginning of the Switch era, we would be seeing even more extraordinary sales. I would like to argue that Kirby Star Allies has only sold as well as it has because it was simply a solid Kirby game that came out early for the Switch. Take a look at Kirby Triple Deluxe. Came out in the beginning of the 3DS era, or at least earlier into the 3DS era, sold 2.5 million. That's pretty good. But there's another Kirby game that came out a few years later, in 2016, Kirby Planet Robobot, which is heralded as a much better game, one of the best Kirby games in the series, and it only sold 1.61 million. And we're already years past this point. This game isn't catching up to Kirby Triple Deluxe. So what I'm getting at here is that Kirby Planet Robobot coming out later into the 3DS lifecycle hampered its sales potential. So looking at Forgotten Land, well, it has come out very late into the Switch lifecycle, at least in comparison to Star Allies 4 years later, and it is blowing Star Allies out of the water. Now, you could make the argument that the Switch is just a much better ecosystem for games to continue to sell even this late into the generation, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. 3DS was losing a lot of its momentum by 2016, it wasn't doing as well as Switch is now, but I still think the point holds to some extent. And ultimately what I'm getting at here is that I think HAL has seen the incredible success of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. They are seeing this wider audience appreciate their games, their efforts, and it's also proving to be lucrative. If this game has evergreen sales and is going to eventually hit 10 million someday, or at least 8, then it makes sense for them to go all in on another one soon after. And if they do so, and it comes out in 2025 for the first year of Nintendo Switch 2, we could be looking at a game that could be significantly more successful than Forgotten Land, because Switch 2 has at least a comparable environment in terms of sales potential for its different games, and the sequel proves to have a similar level of allure. The sales are likely going to be a lot better. Being one of the first games on the console, being that game that's available early on for the generation, so it's years of evergreen sales, there's a lot of potential there, so it makes sense to go all hands on deck for this project. And when we look at what HAL has been producing lately, it hasn't been that much. It's been a lot less than usual. Why is that? Well, I kind of think that for many years, HAL has been doing a lot of smaller different things, trying to find different ways to make that money, to produce content that people are going to want, and in a way it was kind of like just trying to see what sticks. And now they've seen what sticks, just making the best possible mainline Kirby that is 3D. And I'm not here trying to say that we've seen the end of 2D Kirby games. We just got a remaster of Return to Dreamland Deluxe last year that had some new content in there. I think that's going to come, but I think the priority should definitely be 3D Kirby in the form of Forgotten Land. And I'll also read what Ninomiya had to say, just so we don't leave him out, and to close out this video. We were actually worried that Kirby's most beloved qualities would have to be reduced to better fit a full 3D action game. Once we completed creating the game, however, it became clear that this is a fun-filled title that still feels like Kirby and is easy to enjoy. That made me very confident. This title encourages us to keep making games that cherish the Kirbiness of Kirby, and it challenges us to do many new things in both 2D and 3D. So there, Ninomiya tells us, we are going to get both 2D and 3D games in the future, and Forgotten Land isn't an insult to the Kirby series. It isn't something that's straying away from the Kirby series. It is Kirby. They found a way to make a proper, true Kirby game that the team can be proud of. And so, considering the sales potential, considering the situation, considering their cadence of release, I think it's very likely that their next game is going to be a sequel to Forgotten Land. And I think it's coming out next year for Nintendo Switch 2 to fully take advantage of the effects of being a big game in the beginning of a generation. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.